And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Welcome to The Politics, Prepping, and Paranormal Podcast.
Flippity-jibbity nonsense.
I thought it was terrific.
It's not just big, it's yeah!
Let's go!
Welcome and thanks for listening to The Politics, Prepping, and Paranormal Podcast. My name is Jeff Morey and I'm your host. This week I'm excited to welcome Adam Swart to the show. Adam is the CEO and founder of Crowds on Demand, the original paid protesting firm. So what does that mean? Well, Adam's company, Crowds on Demand, staffs on demand and for hire crowds of people that can be used for protests, events, political campaigns, town halls, audiences, and fan displays, just to name a few. Crowds on Demand can organize large or small groups of people for many, many different kinds of events and has played a major part in the last decade in shaping American politics and public view on some of the biggest, most important issues facing modern day Americans. This is a subject I have long been interested in, so I'm definitely excited to talk to Adam and get a one-of-a-kind insider's view of just how powerful of a tool Crowds on Demand can be. So I can't wait to talk to him, but before I do, let's talk about some of the big news stories this week. I hope there aren't many of you that still believe that they, and I'm just going to say they because I'm not going to get in too deep into conspiracy theories on this episode, they aren't messing with the weather. I discussed last week, and we're all still reeling and grieving for the children, parents, and staff from Camp Mystic in Texas. But in addition to Texas, there have been 3 other 1 in 1,000 year rainfall events across the U.S. this past week. Tropical storm Chantal hit parts of North Carolina and Durham, North Carolina in particular, continued to get slammed with torrential rain and catastrophic flooding, as well as heavy flash flooding in New Mexico in a remote village called Ruidoso, and heavy rain and flooding in Chicago. All these events are extremely rare and unlikely, especially to all happen within the span of 1 week. Blame it on climate change if you like, but those of us that know better, I can tell you that EPA head Lee Zeldin announced this week that the EPA is going to be investigating geoengineering and contrails. And the CEO of Rainmaker Technology Corporation confirmed to the public that it flew a 20-minute cloud seeding mission on July 2nd, just 2 days before the catastrophic flooding that devastated Texas and killed all those innocent people at Camp Mystic. Whether you believe it or not, there are a lot of things that don't add up the more you look into it. Bitcoin has hit an all-time high this week after surging in price by more than 6% in just a few hours Friday morning. The world's leading cryptocurrency reached above $118,000 for the first time in history, as it was trading below $80,000 as recently as April. I have a couple of friends who are crypto investors, and I have to say, I think now is the time to jump into that market. President Trump is a huge crypto supporter, and I think the entire globalist agenda in general is to push for a one world currency and eventually a one world government. And I think crypto is how they're going to do it because they can control it. You can't control paper cash and precious metals, but a world power who controls the internet and the cyber world in general can easily control the currency. Just my conspiracy theorist thoughts about that anyway. Speaking of President Trump, he is readying another round of sweeping tariffs, reportedly that will be around 15 to 20% on most of our trade partners. Trump sent letters to 22 countries establishing tariff rates and hitting Brazil with a 50% tariff. Some say due to Brazil's treatment of former Brazilian President Bolsonaro, who was a Trump ally, and now the Brazilian government is putting on trial and facing charges for trying to overturn their 2022 elections. Sound like a similar situation that you've heard of? Either way, we may be in for some more negative reaction from the stock market and possible inflation in the coming months as well. President Trump has also seemed to change course on his stance on both Russia and Ukraine this week, announcing a potential deal that would send U.S.-made weapons to Ukraine through NATO, which he claims NATO will shoulder the cost of. He's also been highly critical of Russia this week, and a meeting was scheduled for July 10th and 11th in Rome that is being dubbed the Ukraine Recovery Conference. Keith Kellogg, Trump's special envoy, is meeting with Zelensky, and Rhino Senator Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal are also pushing pro-Ukraine legislation in Washington as well. Los Angeles City Mayor Karen Bass continues to follow California Governor Gavin Newsom's lead and remain defiant of the Trump administration and ICE, as she issued an executive order this week that is intended to support immigrants, immigrant neighborhoods, and supposedly help city officials deal with federal agents who are conducting raids in the city and the area. Bass said in a statement, quote, "There's a need for me to have an executive directive to help our city understand how to protect itself from our federal government. What we have seen over the last now 6 weeks of raids that pop up, and we never know exactly when and where they're going to happen." Well, duh. If you knew when and where they were going to happen, then you and others who support illegal immigrants being on our country would warn them, and even worse, help shelter them from deportation. And I saw Sean Ryan posted on his social media this week that he was having Gavin Newsom on his show for an interview. Talk about two very, very different political and ideological minds. Between that and the Epstein list news this week, I seriously have no idea what to think anymore. And I'm not going to discuss the Epstein list at this time, well, because I've actually been doing quite a bit of digging on that subject. So let's do a full show on that either this week or next. All right, that's what's happening in the news this week. At this time, I would like to welcome my guest, Adam Swart, to the show. Welcome, Adam, and thanks for joining me.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks so much for having me on your program.
Definitely. Before we dive into Crowds on Demand, could you tell us a little about your background?
Sure. Well, I was born and raised in California, spent most of my early life there, except for a couple years in Ireland. Then, worked different jobs growing up, went to college at UCLA, so stayed in California for school. And actually, it was at UCLA that I even started this business. So I worked a lot of kind of different jobs, both political and non-political at UCLA, that kind of all led me in the idea of, number one, I kind of wanted to start my own thing, and number two, kind of leading me to this particular idea, which we can get into later.
Got you. So what gave you the inspiration to make such a bold move and start such a unique and controversial company?
Sure. And I'll tell you, so I worked in a lot of political campaigns, mostly on the Democrat side, though I definitely consider myself an independent at the moment. And a lot of the times in that time, kind of early 2010s when I was in school, there were the people running these campaigns, a lot of them were out of the 60s. They came of age in the 60s. So their understanding of activism was a very different type of generation of activism. It was where you could easily kind of get 5, 10,000, 20,000 students on the quad with a few flyers, right? And they were kind of adjusting to a new era. And I managed a lot of kind of Southern California for a lot of these campaigns. And they would say, Adam, get us 10,000 students out there next week. And I'd be like, guys, this is not actually as easy as it may have been in your day. So, but it got me to thinking, hey, if you are able to get a lot of people out there, it changes the complete context of what a speech is like, and whether it's a rally or a protest. So when on a rally side, imagine some of the greatest speeches of all time, Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech delivered in front of 10 people. It wouldn't
even be the same, not even compare.
Context is everything. Right?
Absolutely.
And kind of conversely, if you look at a protest, right, one of the things that we were able to do with protests is, let's just say you have one person who's hosting a rally, 2,000, 3,000 people. I send protesters, 50 people, 20 people, right? Media is outside covering the rally. The media is going to go interview the protesters too. So I have a fraction of the manpower, but I'm also getting a ton of coverage in the media. So I got to thinking, as I was kind of building out these efforts, we are delivering a ton of benefit for these campaigns, and we're either not getting paid anything or we're getting paid very little for our efforts, right? And all the money is going to these ad people, right? The people who are purchasing radio ads, TV ads, whatever, right? This was a little bit before social media ads, but I kind of got to thinking, well, we need to make sure that people are compensated if you're going out in support of somebody, right? And that's kind of where it all started. As we developed Crowds on Demand, initially our focus was just bodies, right? Just getting people out there, participating. But as I kind of got older and more and wiser, I kind of realized I don't just want to have bodies. I want to have people who are sincerely passionate about the cause, right? So it's no good to have people who don't care about a cause. Number one, it reflects badly on the cause. Number two, it gives bad PR. Number three, it doesn't really help when you're trying to explain and convince people. So now one of my biggest priorities is making sure that when we turn people out for an event, we're turning out passionate people, and also we kind of expanded beyond politics and kind of fun events to, PR stunts, corporate demonstrations, anything where the goal is to get publicity.
Absolutely. I got you. That kind of leads into, I was going to ask you about, you're talking about the people you put forth. I was going to ask you about the vetting process, because that's got to be so tricky.
Yes.
I'd love to hear, just kind of briefly, start to finish. I can't even imagine how difficult it is to vet people for something like this, to make sure that they're honest and true to what you want to put forth for your client. So could you kind of just give, the audience a brief rundown of how that works?
Sure. And I think your audience might be very interested in this, because we really have a pretty detailed vetting process that involves us speaking on the phone, not me generally, but one of our team members speaking on the phone to each participant at each event. So every person who participates in an event of any sort has to typically do a 15-minute phone call. Sometimes it's a little longer, with one of our team members to vet them for the event. Now, and make sure, number one, I call it a reverse jury questionnaire, because when you're on a jury questionnaire, you need to make sure that you're unbiased. We want to make sure you are biased, right? And even in our publicity events, we do like a lighter form of this, where we just want to make sure that people understand, what they're in for, right? So yeah, so it's very important to do this, to vet, to make sure that people are, number one, that they agree with the cause, when it comes to advocacy, but number two, that they agree with the methods, right? That we're not out there to shout and yell people down and curse at people and block streets, and, certainly not to be violent or anything, right? So that they understand this is a peaceful, law-abiding protest, that where the goal is to convince people who either are on the other side of the issue or might not know anything about the issue to see things our way, right? So if you're not on board with that method of protest, then we don't want you there. Now, like any other job, I mean, if you go to Starbucks, you might go and encounter a barista who does not do a good job of making your coffee, right? So I'm not saying that we get it right 100% of the time.
There's
but
no way you could get it right 100% of the time. I mean, nobody's perfect.
we're the largest protest company in the country, probably in the world. So we have thousands of protesters, all the time. So it's like, for us, my goal is to get it as good as possible, and balancing that with the economic needs of the client. So what's kind of interesting is a lot of people don't know this, Jeff, is we actually took a loss when we started doing this on we actually lost more business than we gained when we said we're only going to have people who are passionate about the cause, because that actually increased our costs, and a lot of clients didn't want to pay for it. So it actually, when I made this a priority kind of 5-6 years ago, to say this is going to be like number one priority, we actually lost business over it. So it's actually cost me money to do this, but it overall, it's my company, and I know that overall it helps us do a better job, and overall it's going to be a good decision.
Well, I'd say you turned it around pretty successfully. So how many cities and countries is Crowds on Demand in currently?
So all over the country. So all over the United States, and we've done events. I think there's no major city where we have not done events. I mean, every major city, most of the minor cities, even rural areas we also do, probably less often, but we'll do that as well. And that can kind of increase the price too, because let's just say you're in part of Mississippi, rural Mississippi, and you want a kind of a liberal event. That might be kind of hard to get people who are
right
in Mississippi. So that could be kind of a challenge. It's always doable, but it just requires additional effort, I would say. So yeah, I mean, we work internationally too, but more on a selective basis, because the laws over there are different. So we do mostly PR kind of demonstrations outside the U.S. We don't really engage in foreign political events, just because.
Yeah,
again,
I imagine the red tape for that is insane, trying to cut through
yeah,
that.
correct. And I wouldn't want to accidentally run afoul of some regulation they have,
Yeah.
because one thing that your audience may or may not be aware of is, even in other countries that we kind of consider also kind of free countries, like for example, England, right? The UK, they have very strict laws on free speech that are not very pro free speech, in my opinion. So they make it very difficult to express opinions that are controversial, and in fact you can be thrown in jail sometimes for that. So that's just one example of a place where generally thought to be a free play country, but that I feel like needs to do a lot better.
Right. So to make this work, you've got to have a heck of a good team of people.
Yeah.
I guess, do you have like the region managers, or is there like a manager for each city, or you have like a call point, like, hey, this person, you get a call from a client, say, let's just say Dallas, Texas, and they want to have a liberal protest in Dallas, Texas, which is, which I guess the city of Dallas would be, be more liberal, but the state obviously is mostly conservative. So do you have like a person that's over that region or over that area that you would call and say, hey, set this up? Or how many people, I guess, do you have work for you and that cover all this?
Well, yeah, so we have resources in most of those places. So, and part of it would be, it's even more specific, because it wouldn't always just be an area manager. You'd have to say, well, in your example of, okay, you want somebody on the liberal side in Dallas, which we probably do have someone in that fits that bill, right? So we would call that person up and say, hey, this is kind of the cause. We want you to organize this, right? And these are the parameters, and we kind of go from there. So we've been in business 13 years. So I'm 34 now. So I started this business when I was 21. So we've developed a lot of relationships. And not to say that there aren't that many people who've worked for us for all 13 years, but there are some who've been with us for a long time. We try to treat people really, really well who come through for us.
That's great. Without giving away any names, as I know client confidentiality is very important to you, could you tell us about a couple of big events or situations where Crowds on Demand has made a major impact towards swaying the public's view on a particular situation or a subject?
Sure. Well, one of my favorite examples of that is a campaign called Delete Facebook. And we did this in 17, 18, 19. And it was kind of when Facebook was facing criticism from both the right and the left, that basically they were pitting us against each other as Americans. They were, if you leaned right, they'd make you far right. If you leaned left, they'd make you far left. Because if you're moderate and kind of not super political, you're not making money for them, right? They want you to be on Facebook all the freaking time. So they have these very shady algorithms that would do this, that would make you radicalized and would use your personal information against you. So we kind of had some funding from various clients who wanted to hold Facebook accountable and spread that around. So we did demonstrations, and the hashtag obviously went viral. Now, of course, Facebook, people didn't, the actual delete Facebook, people did delete it, but probably not at ultra high rates. But what I will say is, ultimately, I take credit for them changing their name. They don't call themselves Facebook anymore. They call themselves as Meta, because the Facebook name became so associated with the controversies over misusing customer information that they actually wanted to move on and create a whole different name. And Facebook, as a, not Facebook broadly, which of course is still making a ton of money, but the actual Facebook site itself is really now not sort of the primary focus. It's now Instagram and other things. And they've actually taken a step back from politics. So even though people didn't delete Facebook, I take credit for a lot of the reforms that Facebook made to depoliticize what they're doing. And they still need to do a whole lot more, but it made a huge impact in the world. But I still think there's more to do, and would love to entertain a campaign to actually to take that even further. But that was one of my favorites too, because one thing, Jeff, that's very important to me is I like to hold the powerful accountable. I don't like to bully the weak. Even if I think the weak are crazy, right? Like, there are people who I might think are totally crazy, right? On the far left, for example, right? There are a lot of people who I think are very, very nuts, but I don't want to bully people. I want to take on if you think those people are nuts, I want to take on the people who are making them nuts at the top, right? I don't want to take on the people who are just sheep in the broader machine. Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Yeah. Before I go further, because I'm gonna ask you kind of about the left and the right and a little bit about political stuff. You described yourself, I guess you say you're a moderate. You're like the white unicorn in politics today. Like, I feel like everybody is either is planted their flag on one side or the other. You're either far right or far left. So, I mean, how would you describe yourself politically? You just say you're a moderate. Do how would you vote?
I think moderates are the one challenge with moderates is I don't believe in moderate tactics. I believe in very strong tactics and strong leadership, but I think independent, because I have no loyalty to either party, and by the way, I in no way would associate myself with whatever Elon is creating either.
The American Party. Yeah.
I don't have any association, because the reason is because I don't think fealty is good. I don't have fealty to Trump. I don't have fealty to BLM. I mean, like, I don't bend the knee to anyone is my point. Like, I don't like seeing, like, when I saw Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi wearing the African garb and kneeling, which just was pathetic, right? But I also don't like seeing, Republican politicians who I know hate Trump bowing to Trump and acting like they were with him the whole time, right? Like, the most powerful thing you can be is an independent, because then you force the other parties to compete for your vote. You tell them what's important to you, and whoever is going to deliver that. So I vote for a lot of Republicans and a lot of Democrats, and I refuse to join either party at this time. I mean, I leave it open, the idea of becoming one or the other, but there has to be common sense. And I feel like both parties, there's just not quite enough common sense for my taste.
I agree 100%. And I respect you for that, for that, and for standing up for what you believe. Cause I mean, I'm sure you get a lot of criticism from both sides. I mean, it's got to be tough to try to walk the line, especially running a business like this. So I respect you for
Work
that.
well
That's
with
great.
left and we work well with right. And the thing is I work well with both sides. I've worked with very right-wing MAGA Republicans, and I've worked with kind of not, I don't tend to associate with the far left. I actually like MAGA more than the far left because I think MAGA is a little more fun. So I can do business with MAGA. I can do business with kind of center right, center left, far left I tend not to associate with, or ultra far right I tend not to associate with. But when you have a common sense thing, what I always say is, like, if you're on the side of common sense, so if you're kind of saying, hey, I don't think 10-year-olds should be able to get a sex change, like that to me seems kind of common sense, right? I
Absolutely.
don't think people should die on the street because they can't go see a doctor. That's a liberal cause. That seems like common sense to me. So when it's something that strikes me as common sense, I'll do it. And when it seems like you're kind of wacky, kind of partisan things where you're just trying to appease 10% of the people who are just very radical, I tend to be on the side of what I call the silent majority. So I mean, it's not a new concept. I mean, but the most notable person for coining the phrase is President Richard Nixon. In the 60s, right? So you had a lot of protests in the 60s from the left, and Nixon, was basically called the bluff. He basically said, yeah, they're out there, but they don't represent the country. That's a minority. The silent majority does not agree with this, right? And he won because the silent majority voted for him, right? So my point is that what Crowds on Demand often does is we're the voice of the silent majority, because oftentimes you have situations where a vocal minority has taken over the discourse because they go to every city council meeting, every supervisor meeting, every public hearing, and they're loud and they shut it down. So elected officials start thinking, oh, well, these people represent the majority view. So we have to come out there, and because we're funded to do so, and we compensate the people on the other side who maybe have jobs and have kids and have other responsibilities, to say, oh, well, you should come out and articulate the other side, right? And by the way, Jeff, that's a misnomer about protests, is the fact that protests are sort of an informal poll. So let's just say you have 200 people turn out on one side of the issue and 50 people on the other side. A lot of dumb people would say, oh, well, people are 4-1 in favor of it.
Right.
But that's a pretty dumb way to think of it, because a protest is at its core a way of getting attention, right? And so it's a way of getting attention. It's a catalyst. So it's not a demonstration of who's favor, who's against. It's a way of saying, pay attention to me because we're out there. So ultimately, a protest is like a bird. You can push it across, but it still has to fly, right? It's still, the wings have to make it fly. And two examples that I would give, because a lot of people kind of falsely say, oh, well, Crowds on Demand manipulates public sentiment. No, we're just the catalyst, right? So if you think about the Tea Party, right? The Tea Party was a very well-funded movement by the Koch brothers and other very conservative, wealthy conservatives. And they got their start in 2009, 2010. They were dressed up in the kind of Tea Party hats and all that, Revolutionary War garb, but most of the initial protests, they were 30, 40, 50 people, but, conservative media amplified it. And then, they had good PR teams. And then it grew because ultimately their message was resonating, right? So it ultimately grew, but if it hadn't been funded, it would have never had the ability to grow.
Right.
Conversely, Jeb Bush ran for president in 2016. I don't know whether anyone remembers him, but
I remember him. Yeah.
He raised $200 million, I think. Everybody knew his name at the time, but he ultimately, the money got him attention, but ultimately people didn't want him.
Yeah,
right?
they can't buy the votes. So
exactly, you can buy eyeballs, you can't buy votes, and the protest is the same way. You can organize protests that will get a lot of attention, but ultimately it still has to be effective.
Right. How would you describe the difference working for clients from both the left and the right, and how they prioritize, organize, and execute putting groups of people in these events, rallies, campaigns, and public displays?
Well, the left is a lot better at technology. So, right,
I
the
can't
right,
disagree with that.
the right has a lot of catching up to do in technology. I mean, so many Republicans I know. I mean, they have AOL accounts. It's like John Jones 2002 at Yahoo Mail or something. So they're kind of in the dark age, and actually, like, they've improved a lot. But they're still way behind when it comes to that stuff. So they don't fully understand some of that. Like, the left has a number of ways to draw people out and using technology. So, for example, with the anti-ICE protest, the left was able to get people out there like it was Uber, right? Okay, we know 15 minutes before. With 15-minute warning, you have 200 protesters, obviously paid protesters, but protesters nonetheless. So they're out there on the streets. So that's pretty effective. The left tends to be more moralistic. The right tends to be more pragmatic. I don't know that that's good or bad, but I found conservatives tend to be like, just get it done. The left tends to like think, oh, well, is this the right thing to do? Is this the wrong thing to do? There's a lot more kind of guilt that comes into it. I think conservatives tend to be more like, if this works, like, do it. But I think I've worked well with people on all sides. The one group that I don't work well with, probably because I think they're too sensitive, is the far left. I think they're just too sensitive and too prickly. And they have a lot of hippies with a trust fund that they can draw anyway, so they don't have as much of a need for our services, because they have all these like hippies who they can kind of draw out pretty quick. So I don't need to work with them as much. They don't need us. I don't need them. So
Right.
so it's tended to be adversarial. And as someone who's liberal at heart, I really think the far left is such a big threat, because they are some of what they propose is so dangerous, but then they kind of justify it on moral grounds. And like, so as a liberal, I think I'm better equipped to fight the far left than the far right, because I'm a natural liberal at heart, except I have conservative tendencies on certain things. Like, I oppose like minimum wage and things like that I think are ultimately going to cost jobs. But so I'm kind of a centrist liberal leaning person.
Right.
But I work well with conservatives and kind of centrists who just want to get a campaign done. A lot of conservatives, because of my long experience with the left, have brought us in, because I know the left, I know how they operate, I know how to beat them. Because what I always say is that you always hit left from left and right from right. When people are trying to, what they don't understand is, if they're attacking a Republican from the left, it only emboldens them. If you're attacking a liberal from the right, it only emboldens them. So you need to find clever ways to attack. Like, for example, this guy in New York, Mamdani, right, Marxist, right, who's running for mayor. When the right is attacking him, calling him, Muslim or something, right, that's only emboldening him, right? You're attacking a left from right. You're much better off attacking left from left. You know what I mean? And
yeah, they're rallying the
showing
troops.
the contradiction, showing the contradiction, showing he's a trust fund kid, right? Showing he doesn't really believe this stuff, showing he's manipulated, showing I think he's racist against black people, is my understanding, right? So, like, you have to attack left from left and right from right.
Very well said. I have to ask you this. I have laughed when I've heard your previous interviews. You've mentioned in previous interviews that the right views George Soros as the boogeyman. I think that's a pretty good, accurate description. I've got to ask you, just out of curiosity, have you ever been contacted by Soros or any of his affiliates?
Well, what I always tell people is, you could have worked for Soros without knowing it.
Without knowing it, right?
Because so you don't know. Soros is not picking up the phone and contracting with people, by the way. I mean, how many billions does he have and how sneaky is he? Like, you think he's calling someone? We all could be working for Soros, right? Because if Soros, I mean, and by the way, that goes for right-wing billionaires too. It's called a Russian doll model. If I've worked with left-wing causes where we funded right-wing groups and right-wing causes where we fund left-wing groups, because if you can use a left-wing group, if you're conservative, you can use left-wing groups to take down, like I said, what did I just say? You attack left from left and right from right. So if I'm a right-winger and I want to take down a lefty, I would create a lefty group and attack them from there. And it's the same thing on the other side. So what I always say is, like, I would never say I haven't worked with anybody because I can't prove that, because Soros has his hand in everything. And by the way, what I always say to conservatives is, the gentleman who was Donald Trump's Treasury Secretary, formerly was one of the top lieutenants of George Soros, Scott Bessent, right? So I don't know what that means, but that's, throw that out there. So I'm saying, like, Soros could be behind, affiliated with Trump for all people know, right? So is that's honestly the reality.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You mentioned when you were talking about the left, about technology, you're spot on with that too. I wanted to see your perspective on this with the rise of AI. It's become harder and harder for the average American to trust anything they see on TV, social media, or the internet.
Yes.
How do you think AI is going to affect and continue to affect your business? Because I mean, people can go on right now and create a video and add a crowd like what you do, through AI into something that's got to create its own unique set of challenges for you moving, with the advancements of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a concern to anyone in public life, because I mean, your image could be manipulated. Certainly, you could add a crowd. You could. I think it's incumbent on the platforms, on YouTube, on Twitter, Facebook, whatever, to go and develop technology counter to that. Twitter, I have to say, X is one of the worst offenders. Like, I see crazy things that I know are not the case. Like, I'm talking to a friend in Israel where, while the Iranians are posting something on Twitter, saying Tel Aviv has been flattened to the ground, right? And showing AI video about that. So, right, and I know for a fact that that is not happening, right? But they're saying it is. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think we're the unique in having to figure out how to deal with that. But I think in this sort of increasingly digital age, I guess my lesson is the emphasis and the need for in person is even more, because I think so many people are just armchair keyboard warriors. So when you actually see a real protest of real people, it actually has a bigger impact than ever before.
Right. Absolutely. We talked briefly about Elon and the American Party. How difficult is that going to be to navigate three parties now to try to to put crowds out there for?
I think we need more than three, because the party, I mean, look, regardless of whether Elon's party is going to do well, and, I don't like to underestimate Musk. I mean, he's a very intelligent person and has been successful in a lot of his endeavors. This is a tough one, right? No one's made it work, right? A lot of very wealthy people, intelligent people have tried and failed, because the structure of our system makes it hard. But, yeah, I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see how it evolves. But I couldn't really guarantee. I think it's more potential business for us, probably, as more people are trying to figure out their place in the political universe. I think America actually needs multiple parties. And then to build coalitions. We do this informally, but if you look at most other countries, what they do is they have they don't just have two parties with that are fractured coalitions. You have a lot of parties, right? I mean, for example, centrist normal Democrats don't necessarily affiliate with Ocasio and Bernie Sanders, right? And you have Republicans, you have sort of um neoconservatives, right, who like war. You have libertarian types, right? You have kind of far right people, kind of hard right people, right? And so I think really you could probably break both parties into three parties and then create maybe one in the middle too. So and what realistically should happen is then there should be coalitions that form within those parties, right? Around all of that.
Definitely. It's going to be interesting to see, that's for sure. The political landscape is just nuts right now with everything going on. So,
Yeah, but I think what also I wouldn't rule out the possibility of Trump and Elon later coming to terms. I mean, these
right.
are people who both love to talk tough and make a big game and then later kind of shake hands. So I wouldn't rule out the possibility of a détente between the two of them at some point because frankly, the main reason is that Donald Trump needs Elon Musk's money and his so Trump's going to Elon will take from Trump's base of support, which won't be good for Trump. But ultimately, Elon is never going to be accepted by the left. They hate him too much.
Yeah.
He can't go back there. So ultimately, he needs the MAGA people to like him. So I think there's too much riding on it. I think they're going to have to figure out a way to make up at some point. But they both like to talk tough, so I don't think it's going to be anytime soon. But at some point before the midterm elections, there's going to be some big deal where they shake hands and kind of agree to put it behind them.
That's a lot of the Republican, the far right conspiracy circles that I'm in, that I hear, everything I hear these days is about the Epstein list, and they say that the Elon and Trump split is to get the Epstein list out, and I don't know. I'm not gonna.
Well, they both knew Epstein, right? I mean,
right.
they both knew him. They both knew Epstein. So I'm curious. I want them to release everything about Epstein.
I think everybody. I think that's the one thing that everyone in this country agrees on. It's like the one thing that we all agree on. We all, other than maybe Bill Clinton and a few people, we all want to see the Epstein list.
Other than the people who knew him, those of us who've never met Epstein in our lives, like me, like you, I assume.
Yep.
I want to read everything. I want to read everything. And by the way, it's such bullshit that they were like, oh, well, we now rule it as suicide. You can't say it's a suicide if you don't have the tape for those, 2 minutes, 3 minutes?
I know.
So, you can't say that. I'm not even saying it's not a suicide. I'm just saying you can't disprove it when there's 2 minutes of missing footage.
Right.
It doesn't work, right? There are too many people with too much of an incentive. And by the way, why would he kill himself? He's always gotten away with it, right? I don't understand that. It doesn't matter. I mean, look at Diddy.
None of it adds up.
I mean, look at P. Diddy. Everybody thought P. Diddy was cooked, and now he's probably going to spend a year in prison, right? So there's a possibility that Epstein ultimately would have met a similar fate to Diddy. I mean, he had the best lawyers in the country, unlimited amounts of money. Why do we think Epstein would have killed himself over this? I think Epstein would have gotten another slap on the wrist, just like he got previously. So I think they've got to release everything. I want to know everyone who's met with him, everyone who's been on that filthy island, release everything. It's so obvious that all the administrations, Trump 1, Biden, and Trump 2, have just been lying through their teeth about this, and they've just got to release it and stomach it. And the problem is that the reason Biden didn't release it is his donors are on that list, and the reason Trump didn't release it is his donors are on there.
There's people from both sides all over it, in my opinion.
Right,
I don't think we're ever going to see it.
I don't. Trump crying on the phone saying, my family, don't release it. It's going to bring me bad press, right? Because it's so funny. People speculate about Epstein and oh, they say, oh, Hillary Clinton did it or whatever. No, the person who likely may have done this is someone who you and I have never heard of, is probably some unknown billionaire who wants to stay that way. You see what I'm saying? There are a lot of these billionaires who you've never heard of who don't want the press about Epstein. Maybe they're like a Mormon or something. They
Right.
live a quiet religious life, and this, even the publicity around this would destroy their reputation and their family's reputation. And whoever these people are, they're calling the president, they're calling his associates and demanding this not be released. But Trump is not a cowardly man. He should be a man and release everything.
I agree 100%, brother.
So,
Adam, what do you like to do in your spare time, man? When you're not, I'm sure this engulfs a good part of your life, but what do you like to do when you're not with Crowds on Demand?
well, I love hiking. I do a ton of hiking. So I love being outdoors. And tennis. I compete in tennis tournaments. I probably kind of play it to excess. I have a little wristband tan here. Not sure if it shows up on camera. That probably conveys just how much tennis I play. But yeah, so probably tennis, going outdoors, trying to travel, see the world. I'm young. I love seeing different countries, learn how they do things. I try to go to, whenever I am traveling abroad, sometimes I like to observe the protests from afar, but see how activism works. Yeah, I watch a lot of TV, probably too much. And yeah, like I probably have enough hobbies to retire, frankly. So um, one of these
Well,
days I'll retire, but there's just too much demand for this stuff at the moment. So
absolutely. All right, where do you see yourself 10 years, 20 years? What's the future of Crowds on Demand?
running 2 campaigns a year, hopefully, on things that are really impactful, 2 large campaigns. That's all I want to do. Right now, I run dozens of campaigns probably at any time, big and small. But I want just a couple big ones and where that's all I do, but they have huge budgets, but also are
Right.
impactful. The number one issue I want to tackle is the nutrition epidemic that is killing people, particularly Black people in this country, and minorities and poor people, by the fast food industry, and the food companies. And I don't in any way associate myself with the Maha, like RFK movement, but I agree with them in certain ways. But these companies like Coca-Cola and McDonald's, in my opinion, are criminal because they sell themselves to Black people. They say, oh, we're with you. We have Black people in our management. We have Black people in the board. And yet they are singularly responsible, not singularly, but they're collectively responsible for why the Black life expectancy is significantly shorter than the white life expectancy. They market these foods with a lot of processed ingredients that are addictive to Black people, right? And poor white people, in fairness, but primarily to Blacks, right? And this is just nasty, nasty stuff. And I want to take them on and put them on public trial for what they've done to this country. I mean, half the reason people are in hospitals right now is heart disease, diabetes, right? Some forms of cancer that are all attributable in some way to people who just are not educated to not drink soda, Big Macs, and French fries. I mean, by all means, enjoy those as a treat, but there are people who eat that like 5
That's
meals,
all they eat. Yeah.
and they don't know better, and the industry like is targeting them. And I want to take them on and make them change by essentially educating Americans on what they're doing. I want to shame them into changing, and I want to educate people into changing and into pushing them to change. So like campaigns like that, I want to take on, and that requires like a big budget and real willingness to take on these type of people. But that's what I want to spend my time doing in 5 or 10 years.
That's an awesome goal, man. I support you 100% with that. I've kind of had a show about that on the back burner for a while. That's my wife is into holistic stuff, and you go to like Italy or, other countries, and you don't find all these additives and dyes. And I think getting the dyes out of the food system's a start, but
Yeah, we've got to get into all that.
I'm with you 100% on that. There's no need for half this crap they put in our food. So
Exactly. And people just don't know better, and they're being misled. But what more obsesses me the most is these companies who are like trying to kind of virtue signal. They donate to Black Lives Matter, and yet they're killing Black people. You know what I mean? It's the hypocrisy that like agitates me like more than anything. Is like, I would just wish that they would admit we're evil, we don't care, we're selling addictive products, we don't care, and be like the cigarette companies. That's what I was
going to say, have a label on there like the cigarette companies.
Yeah, at least the cigarette companies kind of admit they're evil, but like McDonald's and Coke, like they won't admit they're evil. They'll obfuscate, they hire all these people to try to pretend, but at the end of the day, they are one the most evil forces in this country, in my opinion.
Yeah, great calls. I can't wait to see you take that on, hopefully in the future. So,
I hope so.
Adam, it's been a pleasure, man. How can people contact you to hire you?
Sure. Well, you can follow me on Twitter/X at CEO Adam Swart. That's Adam SWART. Or you can visit crowdsondemand.com. That's www.crowdsondemand.com.
Awesome. Instituting real change all over our country.
Yeah,
awesome talking with you, Adam.
My pleasure. You have a good rest of your evening.
You do the same, bud.
Right.
All right, folks, that's my show this week. I want to thank my guest, Adam Swart, for joining me. This has been a fascinating conversation and such an interesting topic for me. If you, your company, or organization would like to hire Crowds on Demand for anything you might need, please be sure to reach out to him via his website, crowdsondemand.com, or look him up on X at CEO Adam Swart. Having that kind of presence can take your event, rally, or whatever you're trying to bring attention to the next level. As always, please be sure to like and follow me on all my social media, X, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, YouTube, or you can email me at thepppodcast@yahoo.com. Thanks as always for listening, and I will see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Politics, Prepping, and Paranormal Podcast. Your source for real news and analysis on politics, prepping, paranormal, conspiracy theories, and the volatile state of the world we live in. Tune in next week and every week for a new episode, and stay safe, stay healthy, and stay vigilant.